You're laying in bed next to her. She's naked. You're fully clothed. And she says, any other guy would just have sex with me when I tell them to. The words hang in the air, like an accusation, like you're broken, like the problem is not the cruelty and contempt your abuser has been showing you over your bedroom performance, or the months or years of being told your normal, healthy needs for physical intimacy are somehow disgusting. No, it's your failure to perform under pressure when your abuser orders you to perform for her as though you are nothing but her tool. This is what weaponized sex looks like within an abusive relationship. This is sexual abuse. It's covert, non-violent, and rarely visible. Intimacy becomes a weapon to shame you, test you, punish you, or keep you in your place. What once felt safe, playful, connected, mutual slowly erodes into something stained with disgust, fear, and confusion. You stop knowing what's normal. You stop knowing what you want. You might stop wanting it altogether. The space that once held safety was turned against you. Today, we're breaking down how weaponized sex as an abuse tactic works. We're deep diving into 7 specific ways that an abuser distorts your relationship with sex, from shaming your normal desires to conditional access and using guilt and shame. We'll explore why this form of abuse is so deeply damaging. Before we go further, I want to be clear. This content discusses sexual coercion and sexual manipulation. If you need to pause while going through this video, pause. If you need to step away, step away. There's no shame in protecting yourself. For those of you who are new here, this is Stand Again, a lived experience platform for male victims of family violence. Abuse is not limited to one gender, but this channel focuses on the male perspective because it is so often ignored, dismissed, or misunderstood. If what you hear resonates and you need guidance, I offer coaching for men navigating these situations. You can reach me through my website at www.standagain.com.au. And if this episode helps you, please like, subscribe, and use the new hype feature and share your thoughts in the comments. Every word you write helps push this content further so that another man living through abuse can find it and realize he is not alone. Weaponized sex is sexual coercion where the most vulnerable parts of your humanity, like desire, touch, and intimacy, are turned against you by twisting and corrupting your internal relationship with sex, and by your abuser defining your role as their sole sexual gratifier within the relationship. You are there to serve their sexual needs and be shamed for your own. This is a form of sexual abuse within coercive relationships. An abuser does this because sex is one of the most vulnerable spaces in a relationship. It's where you're exposed physically, emotionally, and psychologically. When your abuser weaponizes that space, she gains immense control. She can punish you by withholding intimacy, leaving you touch starved and questioning your worth. She can shame your desires, making you feel broken or deviant for wanting connection. She can demand performance while offering no emotional safety, then blame you when you can't deliver. And through all of this, she maintains a form of deniability. When you try to talk about the withholding or the shaming or the demands, she reframes it. I just wasn't in the mood. That's normal. You're being too sensitive. I was just joking. Or you're overthinking sex. You don't really need all that emotional stuff. The abuse is invisible to outsiders, but devastating to you. This is sexual coercion and manipulation. It's covert, non-violent, and rarely recognized. And it is also profoundly damaging. For many men, sex carries layers of meaning that go far beyond the physical. It's often where you're permitted to be soft, where protection and strength can coexist with vulnerability, where you can give and receive tenderness without justification. In a world that teaches men to be emotionally self sufficient, to never burden others, to earn love through utility, sexual intimacy becomes a rare sanctuary. It's where you can be held, where you can express need without apology, where closeness does not require productivity or performance, just presence. When abusers understand this, they exploit it ruthlessly. They know that for many men, sex is the primary and sometimes only space where emotional intimacy feels safe. They know you've been conditioned to see sexual competence as proof of masculine value. They know you've been taught that hesitation means weakness, that struggle means inadequacy, that asking for tenderness is emasculating. So they weaponize all of it. The cultural myth they exploit is this: that men are simple, that male sexuality is mechanical, that emotional connection during sex is a feminine need only. This lie becomes the foundation of abuse. It justifies shaming you for wanting foreplay by framing preparation as weakness. It demands instant performance, regardless of emotional state, because real men are always ready. It gaslights your need for safety by treating emotional presence as optional, even pathological. It positions your entirely human need for tenderness as evidence of dysfunction. Here's how that myth operates in practice. When you ask for emotional connection during sex, you're told you're overthinking it. When you need time to feel safe, you're told you're complicated. When you express that mechanical sex feels empty, you're told you're demanding too much. The abuse lives in the withholding, the shaming, and the constant message that your humanity during intimacy is excessive, abnormal, or broken. And because you've been socialized to protect others, to fix problems, to absorb discomfort without complaint, you internalize it all. You start believing that your needs aren't the issue, that your desire for connection is neediness, that your struggle to perform under emotional duress is a personal failure. You carry the weight of the abuse while she walks away clean. The particular vulnerability for male victims runs deeper than these cultural myths. We have been taught that our worth is measured by what we provide, what we fix, what we protect. Sexual intimacy becomes another arena where we prove our value. When your abuser weaponizes that space, she's attacking your sense of purpose itself. You're failing at the one job that matters most, which is making her happy, keeping her satisfied, being enough. And when you can't perform, when you shut down, when your body refuses to cooperate with demands made in the absence of safety, you do not recognize it as a trauma response. You see it as confirmation that you're a defective man. At the beginning, sex may have felt electric, full of chemistry, foreplay, laughter, playfulness. It might even feel like it was the safest part of your connection. You explored things together, you shared desires, you felt seen. The intimacy was fast, intense, and deeply bonding. This is love bombing in the sexual realm. It creates a baseline, a definition of what your sexual relationship is. She participates fully, she encourages, she initiates, she tells you she feels safe. You believe you've found a space where your full humanity is welcome. That's what makes this tactic so destabilizing. The safety you thought was foundational gets dismantled. The things you once shared together, the moments of mutual trust and exploration, are later rewritten. Acts you both enjoyed are suddenly labeled as sick. Desires that were welcomed become proof that something is wrong with you. The ordinary, consensual intimacy you shared, acts she participated in, encouraged, and even initiated, are now reframed as evidence of your dysfunction. She rewrites history to position herself as a victim. You're twisted for even thinking that was okay. You pressured me into things I didn't want. When these are lies, you did not pressure. You did not coerce, she initiated. You engaged in mutually consensual intimacy. Now she's weaponized those shared experiences by reframing your participation as predatory and hers as reluctant compliance. This is how abusers create shame while erasing their own agency. The abuse lives in this reframing, this rewriting, the weaponization of ordinary acts. Now, the abuser uses those same acts against you. They reframe the ordinary into something sick, the consensual into something coercive, the shared into something twisted. This creates a trauma bond. You're desperately trying to get back to the early intimacy and safety you once had, the warmth, the playfulness. You don't understand what changed. You're confused because what was once welcome and enjoyed is now being used to frame you as a predator or even deviant. So you try harder in the relationship. You apologize. You modify your behavior. You chase the connection that was once freely given. And that's where the conditioning mechanics kick in. Intimate reward and punishment. Affection appears after compliance. Intimacy returns after you've apologized and agreed to her framing of reality. Withdrawal follows any resistance. Coldness appears after you try to set a boundary or challenge her behavior. In time, this trains your behavior. You learn to prioritize short term calm over truth. You learn that intimacy is conditional on obedience. You learn that your worth is tied to your performance. Sometimes sex is withheld entirely as punishment. You're told you don't deserve it, that you've made her feel unsafe, that you're too needy, too disgusting, too demanding. The withdrawal might last for weeks and months, and during that time, there's no affection, no warmth, no touch of any kind. You're left isolated, confused, and questioning what you did wrong. Other times, the pattern reverses. You are expected to perform with no emotional connection, no foreplay, no care, just mechanical sex on her terms. You're told you are lucky that any other man would want this. When you hesitate, when you struggle or falter, you're shamed, mocked, and compared to other men and ex boyfriends who never had this problem. Even asking for connection becomes a risk. Your desires are thrown back at you as evidence of your failure. You're sick for wanting that kind of intimacy. Who cuddles these days? Your humanity is erased. Your needs are pathologized. This tactic is psychologically destabilizing. It fractures your identity at the most vulnerable point, your sexuality, your capacity for intimacy, your right to connection. It causes persistent sexual shame and guilt that follows you even after the relationship ends. It erodes trust in your body, in your desires, in your voice. You stop knowing what's normal. You stop knowing what you want. You might stop wanting intimacy altogether because the space that once held safety was turned into a weapon. This is sexual manipulation and coercion. It teaches you that desire is dangerous, that your body is not your own, and that even in the most vulnerable moments, you're still not safe. Let's look at 7 distinct ways weaponized sex shows up within an abusive relationship. Each type operates differently, but they all share the same goal: to use your sexuality and need for intimacy as a tool for control. The first way is conditional access. Conditional access within an abusive relationship is when sex becomes a performance review instead of an act of connection. Your abuser turns intimacy into currency. This tactic ties sexual connection to your compliance with her abusive behavior, your emotional submission. or your performance according to her standards. Meeting her needs, softening your tone after she's attacked you, apologizing for things you didn't do wrong, or agreeing to her distorted framing of reality, these become prerequisites for any closeness. When you don't comply with the abuse, the intimacy vanishes. Sometimes for days, sometimes for months. This isn't her having legitimate boundaries after conflict. This is deliberate withdrawal as punishment for your resistance to mistreatment. The withdrawal is calculated control. An abuser uses this specific type because it trains you to link your worth to her approval. Sexual intimacy becomes a reward for tolerating abuse and a punishment for standing up for yourself. This creates a powerful conditioning loop where you learn to suppress your own needs, opinions, and boundaries, not to maintain a healthy relationship, but to avoid punishment through sexual and affectionate withdrawal. Her desire is irrelevant to the tactic. The goal is teaching you that love is conditional on your compliance with abuse. And because sex is often one of the few forms of emotional connection men feel permitted to seek, weaponizing it through withholding hits harder than other forms of rejection. For men specifically, this tactic exploits a deep psychological wound. You've been taught that your role is to provide, to meet needs, to ensure others' happiness. When your abuser makes sexual intimacy conditional on how well you submit to mistreatment, it transforms sex from mutual connection into another form of labor. It's another metric by which your worth is measured. You're approved of when you comply with abuse. Love for who you are is absent. And when the approval is withdrawn, you question your adequacy. Her abusive behavior goes unquestioned. What did I do wrong? How do I fix this? What do I need to change to earn her back? The tactic turns your protector instinct inward, making you your own jailer. At first, the link feels subtle. A fight ends where she's been cruel, dismissive, or controlling, and then there's distance. You tell yourself this is normal relationship dynamics. In time, a pattern emerges though. Every time you stand your ground against mistreatment, every time you push back against abuse, the affection disappears. Every time you fall in line, soften after being attacked, appease her unreasonable demands, surrender your boundaries, a small act of kindness appears. A kiss, a touch, a sexual advance. The message in time becomes unmistakable. If you want love, you have to tolerate abuse. What makes this tactic so destabilizing is the emotional hook it creates. For men who are rarely taught to ask for emotional support, sex becomes one of the few socially acceptable forms of closeness, validation, and connection for us. The withholding hurts beyond the physical. It reinforces the idea that you are failing, that something is wrong with you, that the warmth you crave only arrives when you've been good, which means compliant with abuse. And because you've been socialized to believe that your needs should be minimized, that asking for connection is weak, you accept those terms. You'd rather earn crumbs of affection than admit you're being starved as punishment for resisting mistreatment. The second way is shaming of sexual desires or needs. Shaming of sexual desires or needs within an abusive relationship is when healthy sexual and emotional safety is turned into a weapon. Normal consensual requests for closeness or tenderness are relabeled as deviant, excessive, or even disgusting. The partner uses shame and pathologizing language to silence your desires and to force withdrawal from intimacy. The mechanism is simple and brutal. After ordinary mutual intimacy, she reframes past moments and presents requests as evidence you are somehow damaged. She actively rewrites ordinary consensual moments as they appear to show your pathology. Neutral closeness is recast as evidence you wanted something abnormal. Your requests for tenderness are described as proof you are broken, and your memory of what happened is dismissed as unreliable. She uses words that shame your needs directly. You're needy for wanting cuddles. That is pathetic. Or wanting foreplay means you are mentally unwell. Or if you want emotional closeness, there is something clearly wrong with you. You only want sex for comfort, not love. Or even, I should not have to deal with your clinginess. You need to fix that. These lines don't accuse you of bad behavior, they attack your desire, treating normal needs for connection as evidence of you being defective. An abuser does this because shaming your sexuality gives her multiple forms of control. First, it positions her as morally superior while casting you as depraved or damaged. Second, it creates profound self doubt. You begin to question whether your normal, healthy needs are acceptable, whether you're broken, whether you deserve intimacy at all. Third, it silences you. Once you've been shamed for expressing desire, you stop expressing anything. You shut down completely. A partner who's shut down sexuality is easier to control, easier to manipulate, and less likely to seek connection elsewhere, physical or emotional. The shaming weaponizes good men's fear of being seen as predatory. We've been raised in a culture that increasingly frames male sexuality as inherently dangerous, evil, disgusting, and always suspect of wrongdoing. When your abuser labels your ordinary consensual desires as sick or twisted, she's activating that fear. You feel like you are a threat, like your very humanity is contaminated. This is why the shaming is so effective. It attacks your right to have desires at all. It positions wanting her as evidence of something wrong with you, rather than something natural and human in you. It creates a form of internalized disgust. What was once a safe space of mutual exploration becomes a minefield where any misstep confirms that something is wrong with you. So you stop initiating, you stop expressing, you shut down completely. Fear drives the shutdown. The terror of being seen as broken or predatory for having normal human needs. Add to this the social conditioning that already teaches men to suppress vulnerability, to be stoic, to be questioning their own needs. When that conditioning is reinforced in the bedroom by an abuser, especially by someone you trusted, the result extends beyond sexual shutdown. It becomes identity erosion. You begin to believe that your needs themselves are a problem, that wanting connection makes you weak, that asking for tenderness makes you less of a man. It reaches a point where even the idea of desire feels dangerous. Sex becomes something that activates shame and fear. This is the worst part when you start believing her abusive narrative. You start thinking you are the problem, that you are predatory for desiring normal sexual intimacy. When your abuser frames your most human need as something sick, it's hard not to wonder if they're right. The isolation becomes complete when you can't talk about it with anyone else because admitting you want tenderness, you want intimacy in a society that pathologizes all men as sexual predators risks being seen as one. The third way sex is weaponized is through comparison. Weaponized comparison in an abusive relationship is a disorientating form of sexual manipulation and coercion. It is when you are constantly measured against the performance of others, real or imagined. In this tactic, your abuser leverages past lovers, hypothetical characters from TV, people from social media, or societal stereotypes to undermine your sense of sexual identity by saying you don't measure up to them. You're made to feel like everyone else is better, more capable, more desirable, or even more normal, and that you are the sole exception. This is not her expressing legitimate unmet needs. This is her using comparison as a tool to destroy your sexual confidence and keep you performing for her approval. An abuser uses this because comparison creates an unwinnable game. You're competing against phantoms you can never verify, never match, and never talk to. This serves her control in multiple ways. It keeps you performance focused rather than connection focused. It creates deep sexual anxiety that makes genuine intimacy feel impossible. It isolates you because you're too ashamed to talk about what is happening. It gives her a permanent excuse for dissatisfaction that has nothing to do with you. The problem is that you're not like other men. This deflects all responsibility for her abusive treatment while maximizing your shame. When your abuser introduces comparison into the bedroom, she's activating every insecurity about masculine adequacy that you have ever carried. You're not just failing her, you're failing against a standard set by men that you will never meet. Men who, in her telling, can meet her needs whenever she demands it. Men who never needed emotional connection for physical intimacy. Men who performed bedroom acts much better than you do. Men who were real men in ways you apparently are unable to be. If you challenge her on the comparison, you're told you're being insecure, that you're being dramatic, that you are jealous. The comparison can even shift in tone from overt shaming to subtle insinuation, from other men never had this problem with me to any guy would be lucky to have me. Eventually, you begin to accept the script your abuser has written. After all, you've not slept with these people, she has. That's the hardest part. You begin to believe her abusive narrative. Her comparisons do not just make you feel insecure, they also make you feel defective, like you are the reason sex has become so broken. Okay, guys, we're about halfway through today's episode. Sorry, this is a long one. This is a kind of fairly complex and subtle topic, but also it's one that's not really talked about that much. So, if this episode is resonating with you, please like the video and hit the subscribe button. If you do see the hype button as well, which is apparently a new feature from YouTube, please hit it so that this video can get to those that need it. And in the comments, please feel free to share your thoughts if this video resonates with you, or even just using the words stand again, just so that another person out there knows that they are not alone. The fourth way an abuser weaponizes sex is through duty framing. Duty framing in an abusive relationship is when sex is framed as something that is owed, as a transactional part of the relationship that must be delivered regardless of your emotional safety or respect or reciprocity. This is not about healthy sexual expectations between partners. This is about your abuser removing your consent from the equation while maintaining their plausible deniability. An abuser does this by reminding you of the obligations she has placed on you, framing coerced sexual performance from you as relationship maintenance. This tactic weaponizes cultural expectations about relationships and gender roles within the abusive dynamic. She'll say things like, good partners meet each other's needs, or men always want sex. If you don't, there's something wrong with you. These phrases from an abuser aims to override your boundaries, weaponize your reluctance as failure, and demand compliance even when emotional safety has been destroyed by her abuse. For a man too, it funnily enough creates guilt and shame when you can't perform, because now as a man, you feel like you're failing in your duties, even though those duties are being defined by an abuser. We are taught that our value in a relationship is functional, what we provide, what we fix, what we deliver. When your abuser makes sex another duty on that list, It stops being about mutual desire and becomes another arena in which you are measured, another place where you are failing. The tactic exploits your conditioning to see love as something earned through service rather than something that is freely given. Your experience of her demands are seen as expectations. The conversion remains invisible here. This also weaponizes male socialization around emotional labor in a particularly cruel way within this abusive dynamic. We've been taught to manage other people's emotions, to not be a burden, to absorb discomfort without complaint. When your abuser frames sex as your duty, she positions her sexual satisfaction as your responsibility to manage, regardless of your own needs, your exhaustion, or even your emotional state at the time. If you are exhausted, if you are emotionally depleted, or if you are not feeling an emotional connection, then those things become obstacles to fulfilling your duty. The message is clear: your needs do not matter, your consent does not matter. What matters is that you deliver what she thinks is owed. This tactic often arrives laced up in contradiction within an abusive relationship. On one hand, you're told that your desires are selfish, deviant, or excessive. On the other hand, you're told that your role is to meet her sexual needs without question. When you're not interested, you're neglectful. When you are interested, you're demanding. Either way, your consent, comfort, and well being are removed from the equation. Sex becomes something you must provide or permit simply because you're in the relationship with an abuser. This framing can show up as subtle guilt tripping. You'll hear things like, "You're supposed to meet my needs. That's your job as my husband." Or, "So now I am being punished because you are not in the mood." Or, "You'd want to have sex if you actually loved me." Or even things like, "If I cheat, it'll be your fault for pushing me away." Or, "You have no right to say no. I am your wife." The outcome is the same. Your body and boundaries are no longer yours. They're contractually assigned to someone else within an abusive dynamic. Sex stops being about closeness, it stops being about love. It becomes a chore. It's a way of keeping the peace, proving your worth, or avoiding another fight or another round of guilt within an abusive dynamic. For many men, that performance, that chore, slowly kills any real sense of intimacy. The fifth way is affection deprivation. Affection deprivation is a form of sexual control where all non sexual touch, the kind that fosters safety, connection, and warmth, is withheld by your abuser. There are no cuddles, no hand holding, no gentle brushes against your arm, no hand on your back when she passes in the hallway. The only physical contact that remains is mechanical, conditional, and sexually charged. And even that, you're expected to provide on demand. This is not her having lower touch needs. This is deliberate deprivation used as coercive control. An abuser does this because touch starvation is a profound form of psychological control within an abusive dynamic. Humans need physical affection for emotional regulation and well being. When she withholds all affection except sexual demands, she creates a desperate hunger for connection that you can only satisfy on her terms. This keeps you compliant, grateful for scraps, and willing to tolerate sexual experiences that lack emotional safety. It also distorts your understanding of intimacy. You learn that your only value is sexual performance rather than your presence or your person. When you are touch starved within an abusive relationship, you become easier to manipulate through the rare moments when affection is offered. For men, affection deprivation weaponizes a particularly vulnerability within abusive relationships. We have been socialized to see desire for non sexual physical affection, like a touch on the arm or a hug or softness from your partner, as weak, as something a man should not need. So when your abuser withholds it, you tell yourself you shouldn't expect to have received it in the first place. The deprivation remains unnamed. When your abuser exploits that deprivation, you don't have the language to name what is missing. You internalize the absence as normal, and you just feel the ache and assume it is your fault for being weak or needy. Over time, this dynamic trains you to disconnect from your own need for connection within an abusive relationship. You stop asking for hugs, you stop reaching out, you brace yourself when initiating any physical contact because the answer is usually flinching, withdrawal, or irritation at your neediness. Yet when she wants sex, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly, your body is expected to respond instantly to her demand, driven by duty rather than desire. And if you don't respond, she attacks you. The sixth way an abuser weaponizes sex is through compatibility framing. Compatibility framing is a fairly innocuous term for something that is actually quite insidious. It's sexual manipulation where any difficulties in the intimate relationship are reframed by your abuser as evidence that you are broken, emotionally defective, or simply incompatible. Instead of engaging in mutual exploration, open communication, or shared responsibility for emotional safety, your abuser displaces all blame onto you. This is not honest assessment of compatibility. This is pathologizing your trauma response to abuse. Your abuser does this because compatibility framing is the ultimate deflection within an abusive dynamic. It erases her role in creating the sexual dysfunction while pathologizing your response to her abuse. When you shut down sexually after months of her shaming, withholding, and contempt, she does not acknowledge that she created that shutdown. Instead, she frames it as your inherent flaw. You're just not a sexual person, she says. You have trauma you need to fix. This serves multiple purposes. It protects her from accountability, isolates you inside the problem, makes you doubt your capacity for intimacy with anyone, and keeps you focused on fixing yourself rather than recognizing the abuse. When you can't perform, when you shut down, when your body refuses to cooperate within an abusive relationship, your abuser positions it as abnormal. Most men don't have this problem. The implication is that your struggle reveals something defective about you rather than something abusive about the relationship. This is particularly damaging because men are already conditioned to see sexual dysfunction as the ultimate masculine failure. Your abuser is activating that shame, then positioning herself as the concerned partner trying to help you fix your broken sexuality when she's the one who broke it through her abuse. The compatibility framing also exploits male conditioning around self sufficiency within abusive relationships. We've been taught to fix problems on our own, to not burden others with our struggles. When your abuser sends you to therapy alone, when she frames this as your issue to solve, you accept it. You go to sex therapists, you read books, you try techniques, you exhaust yourself trying to repair something that was never broken in you. It was weaponized against you by your abuser. And when the therapist you are seeing tells you the problem lies within the relationship due to gaslighting, cognitive dissonance, and trauma splitting, you push back on the therapist. If you share that pushback with the abuser, you're accused of not being honest with the therapist, of making up stories to the therapist. The abuser then convinces you to stay focused inwards. She convinces you that the problem is your inadequacy She convinces you that the problem is your inadequacy rather than her abuse. She doesn't ask what's going on between us. She instead declares something is wrong with you. You need to fix your mental health issues. It all erases context. The shaming, the mockery, the withholding of affection by your abuser, none of that is acknowledged. Your shutdown response to her abuse isn't recognized as pain or trauma. It's positioned as a flaw within you, something to be diagnosed, managed, or fixed by you alone. Over time, this framing does deep psychological damage. It isolates you inside the problem, convinces you that you don't deserve intimacy, love, and connection. The conditioning persists. You need to fix yourself before you can be worthy of her love. You need to become someone different. But what you needed was not therapy to fix your broken sexuality. You needed safety. You needed kindness. You needed touch that was not conditional or cruel. You needed to understand that the problem had never been compatibility, it had been sexual coercion within an abusive relationship. The last way an abuser weaponizes sex we're going to explore today is guilt framed rejection. Guilt frame rejection is a manipulation tactic where your inability to perform sexually, whether due to stress, trauma, disinterest, or emotional shutdown caused by ongoing abuse, is reframed by your abuser as evidence that you have rejected or insulted her. Your struggle becomes her wound. Their disappointment becomes your guilt. This is not her expressing hurt about genuine disconnection. This is her weaponizing your trauma response to make you responsible for her hurt feelings. An abuser does this because it flips the script entirely. Your natural response to abuse, physical shutdown, becomes the problem instead of her abusive behavior. You can't perform because your body is protecting you from harm. She reframes that protective response as you rejecting her. This serves her control in three ways. It makes you responsible for her feelings while erasing the abuse that caused the shutdown. It traps you in an impossible position where you can't be honest about your limits, and it forces you to perform sexually when you don't want to in order to avoid being cast as cruel. For men, guilt frame rejection weaponizes two specific layers of conditioning. First, you have been taught that male sexuality is potentially harmful and that you must constantly ensure you're not causing pain or discomfort. When your abuser positions your inability to perform as emotional harm, she's activating that protective instinct and turning it against you. Your body's refusal to cooperate with abuse gets reframed as a violence against her. Second, you've been taught that your job is to manage her emotions and absorb her pain without complaint. When your sexual shutdown becomes her emotional crisis, you internalize it as another failure to protect her, this time from the pain of your own inability to perform under duress. This tactic mourns your performance rather than mocking it. She responds loudly and dramatically, making you responsible for her pain. You're told that your lack of arousal means you don't find her attractive, that your inability to finish means you've betrayed her, that your silence in bed is emotional abandonment. The trap closes when an attempt to explain gets shut down. I'm just tired becomes you don't love me. I'm feeling we are distant becomes no, you think I'm ugly. You stop speaking. You begin to fear her wounded response more than you fear unwanted intimacy. You say yes when you mean no. You perform instead of connect. The guilt begins to live in your skin. The weight of being cast as simultaneously inadequate and cruel, broken and harmful, unable to perform and unable to refuse. When you can't perform, when you're too tired or too emotionally shut down after ongoing mistreatment, she doesn't get angry, she gets hurt dramatically, like you've wounded her without touching her. She'll say, "You think I'm disgusting, don't you? I don't know why I even try. Clearly, you don't want me." Eventually, you lose the ability to separate guilt from sex. You stop desiring sex altogether. You're avoiding the grief that always comes with saying no, the weight of being positioned as the one who withholds love when you're simply unable to manufacture arousal in the absence of safety. Weaponized sex is a form of sexual manipulation and coercion. It's designed to fracture your relationship with intimacy, with desire, and with your own body. It teaches you that wanting connection makes you broken, that needing safety makes you weak, that struggling to perform makes you inadequate as a man. These are lies, deliberate, calculated lies designed to keep you compliant and controlled. Once you can see this tactic clearly, you can start refusing its terms. You can stop internalizing shame that was never yours to carry. You can start recognizing that your body's shutdown was protection. Your need for tenderness was human. Your struggle to perform under abuse was normal. You don't have to accept sex that feels like punishment. You don't have to perform on demand. You don't have to tolerate intimacy that leaves you feeling empty, ashamed, or erased. And you don't have to stay in a relationship where your sexuality is used as a weapon against you. If you're living with this, you are not imagining it. You're not broken. You're not inadequate. And you're not alone. You deserve intimacy that feels safe. You deserve touch that nourishes rather than depletes. You deserve a partner who wants to connect with you rather than control you through the most vulnerable parts of your humanity. Reclaiming your sexuality after this kind of abuse takes time. It takes space. It takes safety. And it is possible. Your desire is buried under layers of shame and fear. Your capacity for intimacy has been attacked. When you remove yourself from the source of harm, when you give yourself permission to heal, those parts of you can return. The abuse was a problem, always. And recognizing that difference is where healing begins. Stay strong, stay clear, and remember the moment you stop accepting her definition of who you are sexually is the moment you start reclaiming yourself. This is Stand Again, lived experience platform for male survivors of family violence. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice might just help another man find his. If you're looking for one on one support, you can book coaching with a member of the Stand Again team. Simply visit standagain.com.au, where you will also find grounded information on surviving and recovering from family violence as a man. As always, remember that no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.